there's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So we're close to 19 miles away today. And look at this sea truck. This is from an elevation of approximately 4 feet. Look what happens when I increase my elevation to 6 feet. Hopefully we should see a bit of change. Oh yes. That difference, it's the mirror layer, the reflection gradient, so to speak. So at this free hand, I'm holding now with the tripod stuck to me. So this is why it's wavy. But as you can see, the mirroring effect is a different type of mirroring effect to when I lower the angle. So now when I put the tripod down 2 feet, you can see a difference in the effects of that mirroring. There isn't as much of it reflected down. It's just merged into a, I don't know, just merged into one another. It's important to understand this phenomena because obviously this is not curve. But when we look at the buildings over in Barrow, and now you realise that we have this mirroring layer that's going on. What you can actually see is clear evidence of that. The sky itself is being mirrored underneath the buildings, and the buildings themselves are being mirrored, making it appear that they are looming, which we know is not the case. So it's weather dependent, obviously. Today we have not the best optics for it. However, yet again, we are still seeing these buildings from way further away than we should do on a spherical Earth. Today we are approximately 18.8, 18.9 miles away. This is me holding the camera freehand. Elevation above sea level 6 feet. And again, you can see that mirroring effect without the sky being reflected underneath it. So these people will tell you you need to see the curvature from low down, etc, etc. No. All the time it's being blocked by the atmosphere.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
You can see that massive refraction layer. It's causing the mirroring of the buildings. Right now I'm about 8 feet above sea level from the steps where I normally would film at high tide. I'm just going to increase my elevation slowly and try and keep things in focus. So I've probably rose myself about a foot there. I'll try and go another foot if I can, keep everything in focus. But can you see as I ever so slightly raise myself, those buildings are appearing beyond that mirage layer. It's not the curve of the earth, it's the mirage layer that's blocking it. Now what I'm going to do now is try and stand up. I'm on one knee at the minute, so I should be able to raise another 1.5 foot or so. I'm doubtful I'll be able to keep it in focus for that time, but so I'll probably just pan out a tad. Right, so now I've just raised myself to another 1.5 foot. And as you can see, the buildings are hidden behind that mirage layer. Let me climb one step, which is 7 inches. So that's a 7-inch raise. Now another 7-inch raise. And as you can see, still being hidden behind that refraction layer. Another 7-inch higher. Now, the amount that's being revealed in just 2 or 3 feet certainly isn't what you'd see on the curve calculator. Essentially what we're now seeing of that building there is approximately 70 foot or so of that building. And so 70 foot has just been revealed by elevating myself no more than 3 feet. Now, that's impossible. Clearly what's happening here is it's being blocked by that clear refraction layer that you can see on the end of the mountain. You see where it doubles back on itself. So it's repeating the mountain in that corner, and it's repeating the buildings and reflecting it down underneath it. So I'm going to go up another 7-inch. And another 7-inch. Now, they will say, oh, that's beyond the curvature of the earth. Well, no. I'm trying to show you in real time the effects of that blocking of the atmosphere, what it's doing. I do apologise, this is all free-handed, so it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, but it's the best I can do right now. So let's get an accurate height above sea level right now from where I am. I'm stood on this step here, and these are 7 inches tall. So if we count the steps, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's like 13 steps. Let me just double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. No, maybe 14 steps. So right now I'm 14 steps at 7-inch intervals. So that's 70, 80, 98 inches right now. .98 inches, so approximately 8 feet to where my feet are, and then holding the camera at approximately 4.5 to 5 feet. So yeah, that's pretty accurate with what I was saying before, an elevation of about 8 feet. Yeah, so right now I'm approximately 13 feet above sea level. So my location, again, these steps here, we've got 2 sets of steps, and then we come up to Anchor's Home Slipway, which is the rampy area there. So that's Anchor's Home Slipway. We have 1 set of stairs, 2 set of stairs, and I'm on the 3rd set of stairs. So there's my distances. It is at high tide. 8, so from this elevation, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 12.5 to 13 feet, this is what we're getting. So if I go down 6 stairs, 42 inch, 3.5 feet, that'll take me down to around about 10 foot, so let's do that. So there we go, 6 steps down. And that's what we get. As the viewing angle gets narrowed, the buildings get squashed, and they end up in that refraction zone, which blocks them out. It really is that simple. And just to prove that one last time, if I go down another, let's say 3 steps, and we have a look again, that's what we get. Optical blocking.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So there we have some fishermen. It appears a very, 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 very long way away. I would say perhaps 4.5 or 5 miles away, judging by the amount of times I've been here and seen different boats and stuff. It must be at least 5 miles away. But what I'm going to do, because I'm right next to the water, I'm going to set my camera down on this tripod, so it'll be effectively a foot in height, and I'm going to stick it right next to the water, and we're going to see if we can still see that boat. So that was me freehanding it, holding the camera at around about 5 feet. I'm just attaching it to the to that tiny tripod now, and we're going to see if we can still see that boat. Because it's such a small boat, we shouldn't really see it at 5 miles away. Not from this elevation. So it seems that you can't see the boat, but it's in that mirage zone, because those people are being miraged onto that layer of air, which is effectively blocking the bottom of the boat. And now when I stand up, Interesting.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Watching live, those people and the dogs are coming in and out of the refraction zone, the mirroring zone. Seriously, it's crazy. I need to move again because the tide seems to be trying to trap me. As you can see, it's coming behind me, so I'm going to have to make tracks at some point. However, let's see if we can refocus on this, if the camera would be so kind.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So I'm at Anchor's home and it's in the afternoon. It's really high tide today. I think it's over an 8 metre high tide. The issue that I'm finding today is that we have some really strong refraction going on. Now, I think people are confusing themselves when they hear the word refraction for what it actually means, and what I'm actually finding out is that Strong refraction actually means blockage. It doesn't mean loomed, or it doesn't mean risen up from beyond the curve. It just means that it's a barrier, an air barrier that stops you from seeing things the lower down you go. So I'm going to show you now. I'm sitting in my car approximately 30 feet above sea level, but I will go to the steps and I'll show you from 3 different elevation heights. 18 feet. Well, actually, no, I'll show you from the top. So I'll show you from the top. So 25 feet, then I'll drop to 18, 12 and 6 feet. And you will find that when I get to 6 feet, we can't even see the buildings now. That is simply because of the atmospherics. But it'll be interesting just to show you so that you can have an idea of the different weather conditions that we get around here and the effects of refraction, the real effects of refraction, not this rubbish where you believe that things can be magically brought back from beyond a curve. So bear with me. Just whilst I'm here, there is a boat that we can perhaps focus on too, so there'll be 2 things that we can look at. So this is from an elevation of 25 feet. Now from an elevation of 16 feet. Now from an elevation of 12 feet. So what you need to understand here is that elevation from 12 feet, where I am right now, essentially is where we should be able to just start seeing the tops of those buildings. So effectively what we're actually seeing with that refraction layer that's there is in agreement with the ball earth model. However, you know from my observations from here that this is a rarity to see it in this condition. However, you can certainly see the refraction that's going on. So lastly, I'm going to go down to 6 feet. So, as you can see, that band of refraction is completely whitewashed the buildings of Barrow out completely. You can't even see them. In fact, holding them now at an elevation of 9 feet, I can't even see them. So that just goes to show you how strong and thick this band of refraction is today. And from this point here, which is 10 feet, this is the last possible spot that I can actually see those buildings. So I'll show you what that is now. Can't even see it from there. Let me go up another. So there we have it, 11 feet. 11 feet's the magic number. So, I hope you found that interesting, because I sure did. Refraction is nothing but blockage, and it forms itself in different fashions. You can have refraction that just causes a blockage, you can have refraction that causes miraging. You can also have it where it's causing compression. In any event, refraction isn't what you're led to believe, which is that it can lift buildings up from beyond the curvature of the earth.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
That entire boat is hidden by refraction. The entire boat. Fake waves, fake sky. It's miraging itself down and blocking out that entire boat. That is crazy.
there's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Now whatever that boat is, it is a long, long, long way away. But it's just hidden behind the behind the atmosphere. What we have here is an inferior mirage. It's miraging the sky and the boat, and it's miraging it in front of that, and it's actually blocking out part of the ocean, which is giving these apparent fake waves. So in effect it's lowering the perceived horizon. And yeah, I mean, this boat is a long way away.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Well, I went down to Blackpool today to measure the height of the actual pier above sea level. So I got that data, but whilst I was there, I saw the Douglas complex that's 15 miles or so outside of Wales. And I thought I'd show you a video of it.
You're up.
Is this with the new camera?
No. I wish it was.
That's due any day, isn't it?
Due any day, yeah. Right, listen, this is when I was in Wales, and I actually filmed the Douglas complex from whilst I was actually in Wales. You can see that it's got this flame that comes out of it. And I kept seeing this smoke every time I went down to Cleveland in the distance, and I never knew what it was coming from. When I went to Wales and I saw this and I saw the plumes of smoke it was bellowing out, I realised this is what I was actually seeing. So I'll just play the video slightly. You can see the flames on it, etc. And there's the start of the wind turbine. So that was from Wales, and that's the actual wind. That's the Douglas complex. I'll show you the video from today that I caught. Where are we? This one. So look at that. Can you see that? That's the Douglas complex. That's the flames coming out of the top of it. Way in the distance, you can see the smoke coming out of it. And I'm zooming back out now from North Pier. So there I was on North Pier, 44 feet above actual sea level at this time, when I was holding it at the rail. Obviously I'll zoom in again, and I think I'll lose focus on it this time. But essentially that is the Douglas complex. Would you agree, Nath?
Oh, now I can see it. I have no idea, but I'll take your word for it. Look at the Google
see,
map when you show me.
Flames? Can you not see the flames coming out?
Yeah, I can.
And the smoke.
And I see the smoke. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's already blurred up in Mirage.
That looks pretty crazy.
So when I did the curve calcs on it, etc., I went to Google Earth. First thing I did was I got the coordinates for it, which are up here for the Douglas complex. So I plugged them in, put them into Google Earth. I actually got a value of 28.7 miles in distance. Now, because I'd actually gone to just measure the actual height of the pier above sea level at the time, I know exactly what height I was. So there's where it is. There's the Douglas complex there. So I plugged this 208, sorry, going back to the Douglas complex, it also gives you some details about that. That would be up here. It is 54 meters high, or 150 or 177 foot high, right? So essentially 177 foot. And when I put all the data in, viewer height 44 feet, distance 28.7 miles, hidden should have been 282 feet. So hidden should have been 282, and obviously it's only 177 feet high. So we've got 100 feet there that they need to explain to us. Thank you very much. Another one. You guys still there?
Yeah, we're all on mute listening to you, Auntie.
Right, yeah, there you go. So obviously what we've got going on here, we've got this this band of air that is actually stopping us see the bottom of it. You can see that these are fake waves and the sky is being reflected down onto the surface, but fortunately it's high enough that you can actually see the flames coming out of the top of it. But it's a very, very good example of showing you where this this band of blockage is, this 0.5 degree or so or less. When you get to that sort of angle, this is the sort of atmospheric conditions that you bump into, because clearly that isn't sky that's underneath there isn't real sky beneath the flame. It's obviously a reflection of the sky over the water. It's causing the blockage you see in this complex.
So I can only see the flame just right above the water line, it looks like. So I guess my question is, what we're not seeing is 170 feet of the structure itself, so that you would have to somehow figure that into
well, what you can see that this is underneath it. It doesn't go straight down to the ocean, right?
Yeah,
it goes
yeah,
down
okay.
to the,
yeah,
it goes down to the sky.
Right.
The sky is being reflected down over the ocean, and this mirroring layer clearly builds up over many miles, and that's what forms the blockage.
Yeah, but my point is, okay, so I'm in a pretty extensive discussion with a friend on Facebook, and he repeatedly says that atmospheric obstruction does not block or distort what we see.
Is he a glober?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
He's talking out of his arse, obviously.
No, I know, but when I see stuff like this, I just don't get it. It's just mind blowing.
Well, it's like, you know, when I've showed you the buildings of Barrow and they're mirage down on themselves and they look back, the looming.
I know. I showed him the stuff that I had at only 6 miles, and you had you had boats with no bottoms. I had 2 fishermen standing on nothing. And he, you know, in the comment before, he said, atmospheric distortion doesn't block, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, what are these fishermen standing on? And you couldn't see anything between, you know, it was like a quarter of an inch between them and the water. So they're floating on nothing. You know what I mean? It's just crazy. Absolutely mind-blowing. Well, what I find mind-blowing about that picture you just showed is that you've got 170 feet of missing structure that's obviously obstructed by the atmosphere.
Yeah, it is obstructed by the atmosphere.
Could you show the whole structure again with the flame coming off the top of it?
Sure, yeah. 1 second. 4th of August, it would be this video right at the start.
Wow, you could really only see the flame coming over
Yep.
That's crazy. And how far away was it? Where were you away from it?
28.7 miles. So where my cursor is now essentially would be where the curve calc should be. The rest of it's hidden by the atmosphere. As simple as that. It's the watered mirror layer that builds up over and the narrow angle, the narrow viewing angle. So when you get down to like 0.5 degrees or under, you know, you're going to see this effect that it starts to block things out from the bottom up.
So
Because
is
even
what-
if that was actual curvature, there's no way you should be able to see the flame because it would be
look,
tilting away
Yeah,
and
going
leaning
with-
away from us. Like, that's just crazy.
This is an image that I snapped today. The top one is the image that I took today. The bottom one was 18 miles or so from sea level, essentially, when I went at night time and I filmed. Obviously, this part at the bottom, hang on, I might be able to show it on this image actually. This is the image that I took today. There we go. So obviously, this is the pier that's in the way. This is blockage. This stuff in front is a pier that runs in front of my line of sight towards the big one. So when I superimpose my line of sight over what I actually captured, what do you know? And also, can you see the difference in the texture of the darkness down at the bottom? You've got really black at the bottom, and you've got a lighter black here that's sort of blockage, but it's not lit up. You can definitely tell that. That would be the pier that's in the way. That would be this pier that's in the way here. So all this is what we saw. And the curve calcs, again, if I put the curve calc in it, let's do a bit of a line, do it in red. So curve calcs would say this is where the curve calc should be.
Yeah, they'll ignore the red line. They'll ignore the red line because that's where the curve should be. They'll look at the obstruction at the bottom and say, well, that's obviously the obstruction caused by curvature. Any obstruction's curvature, right?
But it's not. What this is, from there down to there is the pier that's in the way on this image. You see this pier that's in the way here, this pier, that there, that pier's in the way. I don't know if you can make that out. Let me increase the size so you can see it. Yeah, so this is the pier that's in the way, the line of sight. Yeah, that we're actually seeing in the image down at the bottom here. And then obviously all of this is visible. And again, curve calcs would have put it about here. That's all I should have seen when I went to Barrow over the weekend. But yet we saw all of it down to the bottom. We saw the concert and everything that was going on. So this is him with his theodolite, and he said that he took this image from, he gives some details of his location, the equipment that he used, etc., and he shows this image, right? And he's obviously saying that the green line is where the flat horizon would be if he was on a flat Earth. The red line, the blue line, they're different, you know, for the curved Earth and etc. But this is the only evidence that he provides. This is it in its entirety. He doesn't show the video, the image being taken. He doesn't show any video footage. He just presents this image with the crosshairs in, right? Now, anybody could do this. Literally, you could put a crosshair anywhere in this image. Am I right, Nathan? And say this is what it should be.
Not exactly the most. It's not like what you do. Let's put it that way.
And I called him out on it, and I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't look at this critically and say, well, how can I validate that this image was taken exactly how you say it was? There's nothing that says that this is an accurate representation of what you did."
It's unfortunate. Sorry to interrupt. It's unfortunate for Ruhif because a year ago, this was the standard that we presented, and what you got was the same exact criticisms you're now giving him from ballers. So flat earthers would present this and go, look, this proves it's flat. And they go, well, how can we even accept it? We don't know where you are. You haven't given us the barometric pressure. You've not given us your altitude. You've not shown us GPS locations. You've not twiddled the camera around to prove that's where you really are. And at the time, I remember you doing it, Ranty, going, what? It's just a photo. Why do I need all that stuff? Now, tables have turned. It's like, no, this isn't the standard Ruhiff, I'm sorry. A year ago, you might have got, well, you probably wouldn't have got away with it on our side. You might have got away with it on your side, but no, not anymore.
Well, I can reverse it. I can reverse this on him. He's essentially saying that he's gone out and he's took this image, and what do you know? It absolutely 100% conforms to the ball model, yeah? Not even close to being the flat Earth. It's the ball. This is the ball Earth prediction, and this is what he went out and he filmed it, and this is his evidence. Yeah, one image with some crosshairs in between it.
Can I?
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just reminded of this image of my criticism, and that is this: the green line is the flat Earth prediction. But that would require the object to be much closer and larger. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I was going to get on to the perspective aspects of it, but well segued. Exactly.
Yeah, I never thought of that as well, actually. Yeah, he has omitted perspective as per usual. We can flip this around, though, and we can look at things like, let me just move that out of the way. So if he was to ask me to do a prediction, this is obviously the image that I took, and I'll just get rid of all these lines, right? So on this image here, if I was to ask to give a prediction of what I would have seen or what he would have seen, and he was to give a prediction, this is what he would have done. He would have said, well, this, where this red line is now, this is what's going into this is the ball Earth model right there. That's the ball Earth model. That's what I expect to see. If you go to Barrow and you look over at Blackpool, you will only see this portion of the top of the big one. That's what the ball Earth model would be. So I can flip it back on him and say, well, do you know what? I did this in a video, right? I did this in a video, and look at the comparison. It's not even close. You know, we're seeing all of the big one, literally all of the big one. And how does that conform to his ball Earth model? You know, this is a video, not just a still image that he's put some crosshairs on. This is actual footage, actual video photography, where we can compare like for like. You know, flipping it back, what would he predict? He would predict that this is where the curve would be. But I don't understand what his challenge is, really, to be fair. You know, he knows I will go out and I'll just crush him with it.
Okay, let me say this right. So that red line, Ranty, is a you're just making that up per se, right? That's going to be the curve.
The top of the entire building is 227 feet tall. Essentially, I think there should be 98 feet of curvature. You should only see 98 feet of the top of it. So putting this line in, roughly 98 feet of the top is what we would see on the curve calcs. This is what the curve calcs would say.
According to the curve calcs.
The ball Earth.
So yeah, if you exclude perspective and only take an orthographic account of the world, therefore maintaining actual sizes of things in their feet and inches value, then it would be that. But presumably, when Ruhiff's making his comparison telling us where horizon, he's not factored in any perspective whatsoever into that. And he'll just say, no, I don't need to. His answer will be, I don't need to. I guarantee it.
Yeah, but the problem is that we're looking at something that's still at 90 degrees. So it's not only the fact that there's that much missing, is that the top would be angling away and the angular resolution would be, or the angular measurement the top would be angling away from us. So it would be diminished even then too.
Absolutely.
But we're not. We're looking at something 90 degrees straight up and down.
Yeah, so the one in the top is much closer. So therefore you have a considerably wider viewing angle. The angular resolution of this roller coaster in the top image is vastly bigger than the half a degree that Ranty has caught it in the bottom image. So there is a viewing angle reduction. What's another word for that? Oh, perspective. That would be it. That's not accounted for when they beg the question. When they just assume that they're on a sphere with the curve calculator. Clue is in the title, people. It begs the question. It just assumes you're on a curve to begin with. It's useless. Begging the question fallacy. Perspective omitting curve calc. Anyway, It doesn't account for viewing angle. It doesn't account for perspective.
One other thing I want to say is that also during the day you get things like this. This is a video that I took today. We get this doubling back underneath. You can see it mirroring down on itself. Let me just get it so that we can see. There's the Walney Lighthouse. Now this is off the pier again, 44 feet in elevation. But watch when you come to the buildings of Barrow. Again, they're all doubled down on themselves. You can see when we get to the end of the mountain, I focus on that for a bit, and this is where you can really see how it doubles back on itself. I pause it right there. You know that the mountain itself, it is going on. It is carrying on. It goes further down here, but it is completely being mirrored. The sky is being mirrored back on itself. So this is the refraction line through the entire area. This is all atmosphere. This is essentially atmosphere, because this sky doesn't live on this mountain, right? This mountain in the background is real and solid. This sky is clearly an optical effect that's being miraged in front of it, essentially blocking the bottom of this mountain out. We can't see it because the sky's in the way. Well, how can the sky be in the way when the sky's above it? Well, in this image and the video, the sky's below it. So it is causing blockage. This what we're seeing here, this sky, is effectively blocking out the mountain behind it.
Or you've got one major cliff.
Yeah. There's been a load of erosion.
So, you know, I mean, you can't have the sky. How can you have the sky in front of the mountain? The mountain is behind, you know, what you've seen how many times I've gone down and filmed this mountain, right? We see it trails off, and it's actually got land that goes all the way across. Now I'm at a 44-foot elevation here. I've filmed it from an inch, right? And I've seen it all. Now we're at 44 feet, and look at the blockage. Just different atmosphere, different weather conditions. And this mountain and this land that does go along here is completely blocked off by the miraging sky that's being miraged in the atmosphere. So anything that would be on this mountain, where my cursor is now, anything along this line, right, would be blocked out by the sky being miraged down on it. And in this case, or when you come over here, it's actually the mountain that's being miraged back down on itself. And that's where when we go further back, we look at the buildings, and the buildings are being miraged back down on themselves. That's why we've got this doubling effect here. So we wouldn't see the bottom of it because it's the atmosphere that's creating this miraging effect.
Coupled with Airy's diffraction, a limitation of the viewing angle, which would be pretty consistent, but I think in this instance, yeah, you're right. Because we had this conversation a couple of days ago, and I was like, stop calling it atmospherics. It's Airy's diffraction that we're looking at. But lo and behold, you go out and pick one that's going to be that's going to piss all over my bonfire. Well done, Ranty. You got your way in the end. But yeah, Airy's diffraction is still part and parcel of what's going on here. You do have a narrowing of the viewing angle down to nothing. So that will always be the case.
The other thing to point out is there is already a challenge on the table. So before Ruif challenges Ranty to do something, when he's already done something and there already is something on the table, perhaps Ruif should come back with the answer to Ranty for why it is we can see the streetlights from 20 miles away if the Pontchartrain nonsense video that shows that we're supposed to be curved is true. Because Ranty should validate that, and he didn't. He failed to validate the Pontchartrain observation. So why is that?
Well, here's something that's interesting. Now, the Plain Truth asked before, he said when he saw the flames of that thing in the distance, the complex in the distance, right? He said, how come we don't see the bottom of it? Yeah, but we see the flames. Well, if you look at this and you predict, okay, anything that's below this, you're not going to see it because it's being blocked by the atmosphere. But the flames, so essentially the flames that are like 200 feet tall, start at 200 feet or essentially that height, you can see them because they're above the refraction zone. So it's not being miraged down on itself. So anything that's in that zone is going to be hidden, the same as the complex. I might show you that video. We have it.
Diffraction zone.
So it's the same here. So when we look at this image, I'm just going to pause it there. and you can see the flames, but can you also see the sky underneath it? It's exactly the same. The sky underneath it is the blockage. It's the atmosphere that's blocking out that complex. Forget the fact that we shouldn't even see the flames anyway, because they should be long gone behind the curve calcs, right? The actual blockage is the atmosphere, the narrowing of the angle that's causing this mirage in this mirroring layer to repeat the sky, essentially blocking out that entire oil rig. The same as the mountain. It's exactly the same as the mountain. So that's what I just wanted to show you anyway.
Thank you, Renty. Awesome as ever.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, inferior mirage has been the reason for, boats vanishing bottom up or etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
In this video, you are going to see what happens when you narrow your field of view over a long distance. This will confirm unequivocally that compression of distant objects does occur when you narrow your field of view. I'm going to play two portions of this video right now, followed by the entire video at the end of the demonstration. From an elevation here of approximately 30 feet, I zoom into the Stena Hibernia, leaving Heysham and heading for the Isle of Man. It passes right in front of Peel Castle. So by using ship AIS, I can confirm its distance away by plotting its route on Google Earth. I have taken a screenshot, and here we have an overlay, which I place onto Google Earth, and we have a distance to the boat of 6.3 miles. And this distance might be useful in further research. Now, each step is 6 inches high, and I lower my elevation to 1 foot above actual sea level or thereabouts. Now yes, curve calcs say 17 feet should be hidden, and clearly this is not the case. But this is not what this video is about. This video is about what can we see, can we prove what we see, and what is happening to the image. Luckily, this boat has very identifiable markers: blues, whites, oranges, and words. By means of these markers, we can assess both elevation data. Most important of all the data is two factors: the length of the boat when scaling and the orange hull. The orange hull proves we are seeing right down to the waterline and is a fantastic guide for measuring. I take two still shots of the 30-foot and 1-foot elevations and compare them. What is evident that when placing both boats at the same length, we see drastic differences in height. This becomes much more pronounced the lower down the image we go. The top part of the image is nowhere near as compressed as the lower part. It seems, and the evidence backs this up, that the narrower the viewing angle, the greater the compression. Take a look. The orange hull is visible on both, proving we are seeing all of the boat. Look at the height of the words, drastically smaller on the narrower angle. There is no denying that the image of the boat at the narrowest angle is severely compressed. How does this help us understand the flat Earth? Well, we hear often that boats go over the horizon. What if they just go into the narrowest angle and the boat's hull suffers compression? The further the boat goes away from the observer, the more of the boat gets into that very narrow angle. More of the boat gets compressed, yet the higher part of the boat, sitting in an area with a greater viewing angle, does not suffer the same compression as the hull. This effect on our eyes and cameras will make it appear that the boat is going over a curve, when alternative research such as this show it to be just compression. You can see the evidence with your own eyes here. Nothing has been altered. All this does is show you the effects of optics and a lowering of the viewing angle over distance. We don't need to see how much is hidden. We don't need the curvature calcs. These are simply for reference. So I will reiterate that this is all to do with compression. The height of the hull to the top of the boat versus the length of the boat. We can clearly see that the narrower the angle, the more compressed the boat's hull gets, whilst out of that narrow viewing angle, the top part of the boat stays relatively the same height. So again, this is not an exercise in the curvature calcs. This is not an exercise in how much of the hull we can or cannot see. We know we are seeing all of the boat. The fact we can see the orange hull proves this. This is beyond question. I'll just play the entire video for you now so you can see for yourself. The only thing we need to concentrate on here is the compression of the boat.
So this boat is passing right in front of the Stena line. From an elevation right now of approximately 30 feet plus, perhaps nearer 40 feet. And I'm going to go and see if I can see it at 1 foot. Let's rush. So here's where I'm going to be resting my camera, on this ledge with it underneath my fingers. I'm going to lie down now on this step. It's at high tide. let's see what we can see. There she blows. At under a foot. Where's the stena line gone? So here's where my camera is. Just going to pull away. And there's where the tide is. 3 inches perhaps. I hope you enjoyed that one. From Ranty, and I'll see you again.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. there's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
I filmed the Stena Hibernia as it disappeared into the distance. As the boat got further away, the atmosphere, coupled with a narrowing of the viewing angle, allowed an inferior mirage to start to form. This is the point where the inferior mirage started, and I have placed a red line so it can be easier to see where the mirroring started to show. You will note that everything below the red line is in actual fact a replica image of the boat above, the same as if you placed a coin on a mirror. Here you can see what the Stena Hibernia looks like from a similar angle without any atmospheric issues to contend with. In this video, we see a dog and the pet's owner on a beach 1 mile away. The camera height is 3 feet. At this distance, there is no pseudo-curvature, and so we have a clear line of sight. Notice how the dog is on the sand, and yet its legs and mid-body are hidden by an inferior mirage, which is causing a mirroring downwards of the sky above. Yes, the blue underneath the dog and its owner is a reflection of the sky. Notice how it only affects the very smallest angle, resulting in only the lowest parts being hidden. Later in this video, the entire dog is hidden behind a wall of mirage, and this has absolutely nothing to do with any curvature of the Earth. If the dog's owner walked away from the camera, they too would be hidden behind the same mirage. This is also the critical angle at which different things start to happen to distant objects. Coupled with inferior mirages, that narrow viewing angle can also cause our eyes and camera to compress anything that gets in that area. Take a look at some images taken of the same boat at different heights, therefore narrowing the viewing angle to the hull and below. The width of the boat stays the same. Anything outside the critical angle stays the same in apparent size. Yet once the critical angle has been breached, the compression is severe. All the hull is visible on the Stena Hibernia here. See the wording and the orange hull beneath? Yet its height is drastically different up to the mid part of the boat. This is a very good example of the critical angle and what happens in that area. You will notice as the filming continues on the boat, its angular size changes. In effect, it gets smaller as it moves away. Not only is it moving away, more of it is being pushed by virtue of its angular size change into the critical angle mentioned before. Now we have two issues to contend with. The boat's hull is now being compressed, and the boat's midframe is also being hidden behind a wall of mirage. The object we are looking at is almost unrecognizable from the boat we saw at the beginning. It appears as just a smudge floating above the water. Now let's take both observations and see if there are any similarities. So there are two factors to consider when viewing things in the very narrow viewing angle. essentially trying to see things at around 90 degrees to yourself. Compression is a very real, observed phenomenon, which also acts to hide boats and distant buildings from the bottom up. We are only just starting to look at our environment with a fresh approach and fresh data that casts huge doubt on the presupposition we live on the ball. There is no scientific evidence for the ball model. Remember this when you look back at this video. The science we have is in its infancy, but already it is more compelling than believing that water is sticking to a spinning ball. Do we have all the answers yet? Well, no. But science being conducted all over the world is showing that there is no curve to be found. People are starting to wake up and question. Ask yourself, are you going to partake of the blue pill or the red pill?
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, inferior mirage has been the reason for, boats vanishing bottom up or etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Let's talk some more about inferior mirages. Following on from the video titled The Inferior Mirage Atmospheric Blocking Flat Earth, I have been looking back and comparing data that backs up the claims I made in that video. Throughout the year, I have referenced fake waves and hidden behind the atmosphere many times, and now I can back this up with some more compelling video evidence. Luckily, I am a creature of habit, and have been returning to the same location almost daily for the past 7 months. I haven't always filmed. Typically, the weather will be windy, overcast, raining, and on many occasions, even the hills in the Lake District or Wales are completely hidden. Other times we see very obvious blockage of the buildings in Barrow. And the question is always the same. What causes this? You see, when the weather is settled and there is little to no weather distortion, we see a very long way. In fact, we see shore to shore. I have taken many impossible on the ball images and videos, and I'm always met with the same response from the globe believers: looming refraction. I take great offense to this for several reasons, but most importantly this one. The mountains behind the building do not show any signs of a cutoff where the loom meets the real world. You see, refraction is only supposed to happen in the area where there is a medium change great enough to affect the light, typically right above the water. When this gradient stabilizes, you would see a very distinct layer where loom meets the real world, unless you are saying the entire mountain is loomed up in perfect symmetry as well, which would then beg the question, why is the water not loomed up too? Well, of course, we all know this is nonsense. Yes, a beam of light can be manipulated to change direction. But show me billions of beams of light all changing direction at 7.6R and appearing crisp and clear as a full image, with no distortion and visible for hours and hours with no shimmering? You won't, because this has never been evidenced anywhere in any observation. No matter how many times the globalists may want it to be true, it simply is not. So understanding the causes behind the photography is where I put my energies, and is where my research has brought me up until this point. Let's take a look at some looming and apparent great proofs of the ball. Take a look at the red line and you will see a clear inferior mirage. The top of the building has an inverse mirror image of itself below, and if I change my elevation height, the amount of mirage is either decreased or increased dependent on the angle I view it at. The globers will, and have said many times, the mirage layer is the curve of the Earth. That is where the curve takes effect, and we don't see the bottom of the building because it is behind a wall of water. There we have it. End of story. Debate is over. Or is it? It is my contention that the inferior mirage is actually the atmosphere above the water acting as a mirror, and in fact, this atmosphere is hiding the bottom of the buildings, not the curve. Can this be proved? Yes, it can. In this video, from an elevation of approximately 30 feet, at high tide, I look across at Barrow in Furness on what I would call a nice sunny day with almost no wind. Nothing flat earth proof here. My elevation negates any claims of this, as what we see, we should essentially see in any model you pick. But pay attention to the height of the water as we pan across to Devonshire Dock Hall. At high tide, on a calm day, we can see that the tide pushes against the sand dune in this location right here. So now we have a baseline at high tide with an elevation of 30 feet above actual sea level. I took my P1000 out for its first trip to Ankersholm, and the weather was typical for this location. Poor. In fact, it's like this almost 90% of the time. No wonder, when we see the footage, the globe has been able to hoodwink people for generations. Well, on my first shoot with it, I filmed this scene. The buildings of Barrow had an inferior mirage, and I couldn't make out the lower part of the buildings or the sand dune. In fact, if the curve model was to be believed, I was seeing the curve at the mirror line. But something occurred to me. You see, this was the same spot I filmed the previous video. And today, I was also higher above actual sea level, as the tide was between low and mid as seen here. So if the tide was lower, and I was higher above sea level, how on earth could the mirror line be where the curve is? How could this be the curve of the Earth if this is where high tide is? Again, this is the same location on different days. I'm not asking you to say this supports this model or that model. What I'm asking is that you look at the evidence of the inferior mirage and ask, is the Earth curve producing it or the atmosphere? In my opinion, the evidence speaks for itself. In my opinion, the atmosphere is creating the blockage by means of the inferior mirage. The mirror image we see is hiding everything and anything below it. The same as the boat and the dog in my earlier video. If you look through some of my videos, you will see how this optical effect is prevalent in many observations, which Globers claim matches the 8" per mile squared curvature calculator. They will tell you any blockage is curvature. Well, in the case of inferior mirages, I think we are seeing that this is most certainly not the case. As the blue pill, along with the blue marble, is becoming less palatable day by day, it really is only a matter of time before you open your eyes, grab a hold of that red pill, and open your mind to a whole new reality. Welcome to Flat Earth.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. there's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So I'm down at the mirror ball again, and we're looking over towards Barrow in Furness. The temperature right now is 1.5 degrees, which is far colder than probably the water itself. So when we look at this corner of the mountain, absolutely 100% you can see the inferior mirage of the actual mountain itself. Now, I filmed this many a time during the summertime, and we don't get anything like this. Not to this degree anyway. The tide is actually out, so it's really low tide, and I'm actually at the top of the wall, so I'm essentially in the region of, what, 45 feet above sea level? And of course, when we pan along to some of the more obvious features of Barrow in Furness, which in this case, when we're looking at the chimneys that are next to the buildings of Barrow, you know, Devonshire Dock Hall, we have the chimneys that are obviously sticking out right now, clearly visible. But you can see that that inferior mirage is absolutely stopping you see the bottom of the building. And we know from previous footage from this location that where that inferior mirage is right now is essentially where those buildings, the top of those buildings, should be seen. So everything that we should see is absolutely hidden behind the inferior mirage. This buoy is a very good indication of where Devonshire Dock Hall should normally be seen. But as we can see with both the chimney here and the side of the mountain itself, you can see where the inferior mirage is doubling back on itself. So where it starts to curl, everything below that is a mirror image, but obviously reversed. So where that curve starts, you've got the mountain reflected down on itself, and you've got the sky reflected down on itself. So essentially it's like putting a mirror, looking into a mirror, but looking up, and it's reflecting it down. So that's what's happening. It's atmospheric blockage. There should be no issues with the heights here, the heights involved and the distances. You know, it's expected that you should be able to see some of those buildings at least from this distance and at this altitude right now. However, the atmosphere itself is the blockage, not the curvature of the Earth. Have one more little look.
maybe not. Doesn't want to focus anymore. Anyway, that's what we can see looking towards the north. And of course, when we look towards the south, we would normally see mountain range upon mountain range over there, and there's nothing to be seen at all. And these mountains should be visible. Let's be honest, they should be visible. But the atmosphere isn't allowing us to see it. It's just the way it is. This is why you can't model anything inside. So it's not like you can go and do a test on a floor, for instance, because it has no atmosphere. Essentially, not the atmosphere that we're looking at across right now, which is, you know, it's outside, and it has all kind of variables going on. So of course there's a limit to what you can always see. You always seem to have that inferior mirage, except for the very, very, very odd day that you get very clear weather. And I've only experienced that a handful of times. So this is where they hide the curvature. Sorry, this is where they hide the flatness, and they replace it with curvature. The atmosphere itself is the blockage. It's just the nature of our environment. This is what causes it.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So I'm down at Ankersholm again, and now we actually are looking over at the Welsh mountains. And as we pan through and we move to the left, there should be mountains visible there, but as you can see, we can't see them. Now, you often hear globers say, well, if we live on a flat earth, how come we can't see the Eiffel Tower from Blackpool, or any kind of nonsense like that? But one thing we can see, again, is the inferior mirage. Now, the globers will say this is looming. We've heard this before, floaty land, it's looming. Well, no, that isn't looming. The bottom of those mountains that we see and have evidence from this location before are hidden by the inferior mirage. The wind turbines in the foreground give some perspective. They, again, don't appear to be suffering the same effect because they're much nearer. So it hasn't had the time, the inferior mirage or the atmosphere hasn't had the time to affect them quite as much as the mountains in the background. But you can see that's just a mirror image of the mountains underneath it, with the sky being reflected underneath. So this isn't looming, this is not looming. This is atmospheric blockage caused by the inferior mirage. I have plenty of other videos that will corroborate that when this effect isn't in place, those mountains you will be able to see all joined up, and they go further down and they carry on and they all join up and they end up meeting up with these over in the distance here.
So, another perfect example of the Inferior Mirage hiding what should be visible. I'll show you my location in a moment. But yeah, this is not looming. The Globers will say this is looming. That's nonsense. You should see these mountains, the top of those mountains, everything that you're seeing now, you should see on a globe Earth or a flat Earth. It makes no difference. But the bottoms are hidden behind that air blanket, causing the effect of inferior mirage. So again, we're at low tide. I'm high on the wall at Anchor's home. My elevation above sea level right now is approximately 50 feet. And here we are at Anchor's home.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So back at Anchor's home, high on the wall, 50 feet above sea level. I should be able to see those buildings of Barrow very clearly. I should be able to see the sand dune in front of them, and there should be no issues from the elevation that I am now in capturing or seeing the things that we've seen many times from this location. So I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to show you the effects that the atmosphere is having today. So it's cold. The temperature right now is about 5 degrees. It's at low tide. So where that inferior mirage is there, that's where the sand dunes are. But we can't see them because there's a mirror image, an inverted mirror image of Devonshire Dock Hall and the other buildings around it. There we have Walney Lighthouse, which is much nearer, and you can actually see the mirror image of that. And you can also see the sand dune that's in front of it, in this case, because it's much nearer. But when you're talking about looking at the buildings of Barrow, which are further away, that effect has greatly increased. And then when we paddle along to the low-lying land, we see the inferior mirage making it look as if that land is looming, or what the Globers would say is looming. We just know it as atmospheric blockage caused by the
Inferior Mirage.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So here I am back at Anchor's home. It's low tide yet again. Different weather, different conditions, and essentially we're going to be looking at the buildings of Barrow again. This time without the Inferior Mirage. So the video I released a couple of days ago that showed the atmospheric blocking which was caused by the Inferior Mirage that blocked out the sand dunes and alike, that isn't in play today. So what you're going to see is completely different. And obviously we're not talking about earth curve here. We're talking about the effects of the Inferior Mirage. Well, we do have a small amount of Inferior Mirage, but nowhere near as much as before. This is the mast, and you can see all the land underneath that. Now, if you remember on the other video, that looked more like floaty land. So obviously you can actually see that there is land underneath it. Just bear me whilst to focus the camera. So yeah, there you can properly see the land underneath it. There's land. It just looked like floaty land in the last video. Now, it's the same height of tide, so clearly the blockage was atmospheric. The Inferior Mirage was in the air, in the atmosphere. It was not on the water, it was not the curvature of the earth, it was the atmosphere causing the blockage. This is what we should have seen the last time we were here filming with the Inferior Mirage. However, we didn't see that. We saw the buildings as they are now, but then we didn't see the sand dune in front of them. There was a mirror image inverted of the buildings that was causing a blockage. Now, you can see today that
a direct line of sight isn't curvature, a direct line of sight is atmospheric. So the inferior mirage was happening in the air. Then when we come over to the lighthouse, if you remember in the last video, the lighthouse had a mirror image underneath it. And there we have Barrow Town Hall. So yet again, 100% proof that the inferior mirage happens in the atmosphere, and that inferior mirage blocks out the bottom of things. And in actual fact, I just panned across there not long ago, and we didn't actually see this piece of land. We saw this piece of land here, but then this extra piece of land has just popped up out of that inferior mirage that you can clearly see. There's a tiny bit of it going on at the bottom, but nothing like the other day.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Okay, so let's address the notion that boats go over the horizon by using logic and reason, something sorely missing in today's society, where it seems regurgitating a narrative over and over again is sadly removing this ability from most people, and is also dumbing down the population into thoughtless, brainless zombies. So let's begin. Using my own observation of the Stena Hibernia as it made its way from Heysham to the Isle of Man, I will show you how to critically analyse what we are seeing, as opposed to simply believing that you are seeing it go over Earth curve. First, we need to acknowledge several things. 1, the inferior mirage. 2, perspective. 3, atmospheric effects. Courtesy of the channel Flat Earth Audio, the footage I filmed has been motion tracked and sped up, so that you can see the change over a much shorter video. Okay, so you've seen the video, and now we need to go through the process of understanding what we saw by means of a scientific breakdown of the factors in play. Firstly, the inferior mirage. What effects is this having on the boat? Well, to get an answer to that, you need to trawl through the data at hand in other videos uploaded on my channel. Here we have a dog playing in the sands 1 mile away and intermittently being hidden by an inferior mirage. Certainly not by earth curve. Here we have 2 shots of the same piece of land taken on different days. In one we have a very clear image. And on the other, an inferior mirage. The land we see on a clear day is hidden behind the inferior mirage. In effect, just as with the dog example, the air itself is causing a blockage by means of an inferior mirage. This effect in both examples is hiding the bottom of the target. Now, using logic and reason, knowing that the air is the medium in which the inferior mirage manifests itself, let's apply that same thought process to the boat. As the boat gets further away, the inferior mirage starts to block out the bottom of the boat. Essentially, the hull should be seen. And were it not for the inferior mirage, it would be, just as with the video of the land you just watched. Does this thought process resonate with you? Do you believe the dog was bouncing in and out of earth curve? Or that the land that we saw on a clear day was being loomed up by a process of refraction over the curvature of the earth? Isn't it more logical to think that the narrow viewing angle contributes to creating the effect of an inferior mirage, and that blockage is in the air, and this is the cause of the lower part of the boat being hidden? Next, let's take a look at perspective. Things get smaller the further away they go. This image clearly shows the boat in different stages of its journey, getting perspectively smaller the further away it goes. The red line denotes the angle where the inferior mirage is taking place, and it is a consistent height above the waterline in each and every still shot. So the angle of the inferior mirage is not changing. However, the boat certainly is getting further away, and thus smaller and smaller, to the point where half of the boat is now completely hidden behind that inferior mirage. This is perspective in play, and had it not been for the atmospheric effects in the last images, I'll get to that in a minute, then we would have seen the boat get so small that all of it would have been hidden behind that air layer that is causing the inferior mirage. Again, this goes without question, that critical analysis of these observations must always include perspective, and must also include the ability to ask questions and then apply logic and reason to your analysis. Simply parroting a narrative will no longer cut it. This boat is not going over earth curve. Lastly, let's look at the atmospheric effects. Well, in the last few frames of the video, we see the boat vanish. The camera is no longer able to see it. In this exact case, did the boat disappear due to it going over the curve? Or was it due to the density of the atmosphere making the boat simply blend into the background? Let's take a critical look at the evidence. Here we have one of those last frames where the boat essentially is invisible. Now let's ramp up the colour and contrast and see if anything is still to be seen. You guessed it, the boat was indeed still there. You can clearly make out the top of the boat and an inferior mirage below it. Yes, the atmosphere is one of the main reasons why we cannot see for hundreds of miles at sea level. So in this entire video, did we actually see a boat go over the curvature of the Earth? Well, let's recap. The bottom of the dog, hidden by the inferior mirage. The bottom of the land, hidden by inferior mirage. The boat has an inferior mirage. What should be the next logical statement? I'll just say it. The bottom of the boat is hidden by the inferior mirage. Perspective. The boat is getting smaller as it goes further away. This perspective view of the boat brings the angle with which the inferior mirage starts much higher up the boat. This really is easy to understand when you apply logic and reason. Atmospheric effects. Yes, we cannot see through infinite amounts of atmosphere at sea level. It will eventually block everything out. Logic. I hope this demonstration has helped you to understand that the only people applying logic and reason in a scientific way right now, when it comes to the shape of the Earth, is flat earthers. To a globalist, this boat video was proof the boat went over a curve. Yet to the scientist in all of us, with some critical thinking, we can come to the very real conclusion that the Earth is flat and that no boat ever went over the curve of the Earth. Till next time, Ranty out.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Okay, so this is going to be test one. We've got a massive inferior mirage going today. I mean, that lighthouse, for instance, is not as tall as that at all. And I'm going to point something out in a minute, because we are at low tide, and right now I'm about 45 foot above sea level. And the distance to the lighthouse is not far enough to be affected by any earth curve. I believe it's around about 13.4 miles away. So that sand dune that sits in front of it, that normally blocks off the bottom of the lighthouse and the house that sits behind it, that's adjacent to it, we can no longer see that because we've got this inferior mirage, and it can't be being caused by earth curve. So next we come along to, obviously, the buildings of Barrow, and you can see that inferior mirage beyond the post at the lowest point that you can go. It's actually mirage in the sky above it, so it's the same colour. So you have the building, then you have the sand dune that's in front of it at the bottom, and then underneath the sand dune you have the sky that is repeated back on itself, and that is typical of an inferior mirage. So, as I say, it's low tide, but we have some weird atmospherics going on right now. But I want you to concentrate on the post in relation to the top of the building to the left, because as I say, this is day one. We're in early to mid-December. It is Thursday. I'll upload this video later, and I want to see if there's any looming going on. So by reference of that star that sits on top of that post, we should be able to get a screen capture of that in relation to the building behind it, and a series of different days coming down here testing whether or not the relationship between those two is any different. No difference, no looming. If it stays the same, obviously, then proof that there isn't that looming effect going on. Anyway, I just wanted to point out the Inferior Mirage because it's quite evident here, and we know that there's extra land further across here that has been seen many a time from this location. The one with the V-shaped tower on it, and of course we can't see any of it. We can't see any of the land or the tower. You know, the one with the truck, where I had the truck next to it, that's not evident, that's not visible today. But as I say, what is evident, what we do see, is the Inferior Mirage. And I'll just want to repeat this, is that when we come across to the lighthouse, I should have a direct line of sight to the lighthouse and the hill beneath it, sorry, the sand dune before it. And the only reason that I can't see it is because of this Inferior Mirage. It's not earth curve, we're actually at low tide right now. So I'm going to zoom out, show you where I am, as usual. As you can see, low tide. By the way, the time right now is about 25 past 10 in the morning. Temperature on the car said 4.5 degrees. So we're at below 97 at Anchor's home. It feels colder, I'll be honest, it feels colder. You know, I'm struggling to hold the camera because it's really, really cold. There's a bit of a breeze, not very much, probably around about a 10-mile-an-hour breeze, but it makes it feel like it's about probably 0, I would say. So, day one done. Hope you guys all enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next video. So here I am back at Anchor's home. It's low tide yet again. Different weather, different conditions, and essentially we're going to be looking at the buildings of Barrow again. This time without the Inferior Mirage. So the video I released a couple of days ago that showed the atmospheric blocking, which was caused by the Inferior Mirage that blocked out the sand dunes and alike, that isn't in play today. So what you're going to see is completely different. And obviously we're not talking about earth curve here. We're talking about the effects of the Inferior Mirage. Well, we do have a small amount of Inferior Mirage, but nowhere near as much as before. This is the mast. And you can see all the land underneath that. Now, if you remember on the other video, that looked more like floaty land. So obviously you can actually see that there is land underneath it. Just bear me whilst to focus the camera. So yeah, there you can properly see the land underneath it. There's land. It just looked like floaty land in the last video. Now, it's the same height of tide. So clearly the blockage was atmospheric. The Inferior Mirage was in the air, in the atmosphere. It was not on the water, it was not the curvature of the Earth, it was the atmosphere causing the blockage. This is what we should have seen the last time we were here filming with the Inferior Mirage. However, we didn't see that. We saw the buildings as they are now, but then we didn't see the sand dune in front of them. There was a mirror image inverted of the buildings that was causing a blockage. Now you can see today that a direct line of sight isn't curvature. A direct line of sight is atmospheric. So the Inferior Mirage was happening in the air. Then when we come over to the lighthouse, if you remember in the last video, the lighthouse had a mirror image underneath it. And there we have Barrow Town Hall. So yet again, 100% proof that the Inferior Mirage happens in the atmosphere, and that Inferior Mirage blocks out the bottom of things. And in actual fact, I just panned across there not long ago, and we didn't actually see this piece of land. We saw this piece of land here, but then this extra piece of land has just popped up out of that Inferior Mirage that you can clearly see. There's a tiny bit of it going on at the bottom, but nothing like the other day.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
So today is the 24th of December. The temperature right now is 0.5 degrees. And look at the inferior mirage that's happening over at Barrow. Just absolutely crazy today. As you can see, that lighthouse is probably 2/3 the size, the length that it is, and that's because the bottom part of it is a mirror image of the lighthouse above. It runs through the entire image. I mean, this is just crazy today. The strength of this Inferior Mirage is really quite something. As you know, quite often you can see the sand dune behind that post. So the sand dune would be at the bottom, and then you'd have the estuary, and you would have the townhouses that are by the water in Barrow-in-Furness, and then you'd have obviously the buildings behind it. Today, obviously, we're not seeing any of that because of this massive Inferior Mirage. Again, over here, it looks like the buildings are floating, but this is beautiful evidence of the Inferior Mirage because you can see the sky at the bottom, and it's reflected underneath those buildings. Normally we can see the land that goes along here. Now we are seeing a tiny fraction of that land. There's just a sliver, but you can see that the atmosphere itself is causing a blockage. This reflection is blocking out the land, and this land is only some 13 miles away, 13.5 miles away. My elevation right now, with the tide being quite out, is essentially 50 feet above sea level. We should have no problem seeing this land. And the only reason that we don't see it is because of the Inferior Mirage. It's so evident. Now, take this even further, and if you were to place, well, anything behind this, you wouldn't see anything. In fact, the sky looks like it's dropped. So the horizon that you're looking at isn't the real horizon. The real horizon is much higher than that, which we all know. Obviously, this is why you can never use a theodolite to measure where the horizon would be, because nobody actually really knows. So, the Globers will say any blockage is curvature. Not so. In this case, clearly not. I'll show you my location, as usual. It's from exactly the same spot that I've been filming from, off this seawall. I'll actually show you it, actually, where it is. So, just on here is where I rest my hand, and then I zoom in. And BLO 97. So from exactly the same spot, and as you can see, the tide is fairly out today. One thing I would like to say as well is that the clarity of the air, apart from the Inferior Mirage, is really good. I mean, if we look over at some of the mountain ranges over here, for instance, you have a good line of sight of them. You know, you're not encountering any of this atmospherics, you know, that the dirty air kind of thing. It's clean air, very clean air. You can see for a very, very long way, and if there hadn't been that Inferior Mirage,
you know, it would have been an excellent day for observations. But what's really made me come today, and I didn't really want to come today because I've been suffering with the flu for the past couple of weeks, but it's this big bad boy here, because it's the second day after the full moon, and every time it's been the second day after the full moon, the air clarity has been exceptional. Leading up to the full moon, it gets murkier and dustier in the air, and you know, you wouldn't be able to see as clear as we have done. Now, I've been following this for the past 10 months, and I've said it many times on Nathan Oakley 1980s channel, on the debates. I even said it on Globebusters, and I put it out there, and I said, what is the moon? What does it do? Why is it that after this, after the full moon, a couple of days after the full moon, the air clarity is exceptional? I mean, we're looking at these mountains here, and they're essentially some 30 miles away, but look how clear it is. And as I say, in the lead up to this, the air clarity has been very poor. Yet you can guarantee that 2 days after the full moon, bang, you've got the best visibility days. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but I'm going to put it out there again. What is the moon? What does it do? Why is it that when we have this full moon, just after the full moon, we get this clarity in the air? It's like it cleans the air. I don't know. I'm putting it out there, so I'm just asking, what is the moon? What does it do? Why does it make it so that the air clarity is always so much clearer after the full moon? And just one other thing I would like to say is that when we look over here, obviously at the buildings of Barrow, this Inferior Mirage is causing the blockage. And what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to go down to the beach. So I'm going to get myself down to essentially, I don't know, maybe 5 feet above sea level, 4 feet, something like that. And I'm going to film it. And you watch. That Inferior Mirage will make those buildings look like a sliver of floaty land. That's what will happen. That's what I predict. And I'll tag it on to the end of this video and make my way down there right now, and let's see what it looks like. So as promised, from essentially 4 feet above sea level, that Inferior Mirage has wiped away all those buildings. In fact, everything is vanished except for the chimney. Now, obviously there's the chimney, but look how big that Inferior Mirage is now. Look at it. And all the buildings are behind that Inferior Mirage. So now from an elevation of 9 feet above sea level, you can see just the tops of the buildings. The Inferior Mirage is blocking out everything underneath it. I think what I'll do now is I'll go to let's say
14 feet above sea level.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Now that's really crazy because I've just finished doing a time lapse from down the bottom there, and that boat never once showed its face, ever. That's crazy. So I'm going to go right down now. You can see how calm the water is. It's flat as a pancake, but we have this massive inferior mirage going on at the moment. Now, I just packed up and got back in the car, and then I saw that boat and I thought, where's that come from? That wasn't there before. Never saw it when I was down here doing my time lapse. So right, okay, so I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps up, 7 inches, 35 inches, and I'm holding it at chest height. So what's that, around about 8 feet or so above actual sea level. And let's see if we can find that boat again. So wow, look at that, that inferior mirage hid it entirely. So when I was down here filming that, those buildings get hidden behind that inferior mirage, whilst I was doing that, that boat sneaked in behind the inferior mirage. Behind the inferior mirage. Now that boat is only, I think it's only about 6 miles away, so I should be able to see it. And I can't see it, it's not there, it's behind the inferior mirage. Go figure. A full boat hidden behind the inferior mirage at a distance of about 6 miles. Look, elevation above sea level right now. Holding it at chest height. Let me go up and see if I can find it from 10 steps higher. it would appear that that is it there. Look at the craziness of this. Every part of that boat is hidden behind the Inferior Mirage. There should be no issues with any kind of earth curve right now, especially from this elevation. This is insane proof that the Inferior Mirage is blocking the bottom of that boat out. Look at it. Wow. Let's go up a bit. Right, 10 more steps higher. Look at that! Earth curve my ass. Let's go to the very top. So when I was doing that time lapse down there, that entire boat, that entire boat there sneaked in behind the Inferior Mirage, and I didn't even see it. Wow. Wow. I mean, look how calm the water is. Just look at it, it's like a mill pond. I mean, even from up here you've got this massive Inferior Mirage going on. And the elevation right now, whew, it's a good 30 feet above sea level. The time, I believe, is around about 10:18 AM on the 24th of December. And essentially it's just heading into Heysham now. So if anybody wants to track that vessel, they can do. They can get a GPS on it. "24th of December 2018, 10:18, 10:19 AM, something like that. It's astonishing that that entire boat was hidden behind the Inferior Mirage on such a flat, calm day. In fact, I might just go down one last time and show you that again, because to actually show you it being hidden behind the Inferior Mirage is spectacular. So all I'm doing now is like, oh, there we go. That's pretty cool. Look at that. And I'm not even anywhere near the water right now. How many steps am I above the actual water? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 steps plus 5 feet. 16 steps at 7 inches. Let's go down a tad further. And obviously I'm at BLO 97. These are the steps that lead up to BLO 97. Look at that. Sensational. I actually will show you my location, just so there can be no doubt as to where I actually am. And there we go. And just to show you the strength of the Inferior Mirage right now, you can gauge it on the buildings over there. Look, see.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Well, hopefully I am live right now, and if that's the case, I just want to talk about the human eye and its angular resolution, and I'm going to be comparing that to the curve calculator. So if we look at the naked eye, we know that the naked eye is diffraction limited at 0.02. That means that at 0.02 degrees, the human eye can no longer resolve that information. In other words, we can't see it. That is our limitations of the human eye. So let's have a look at a few things. Let's have a look at Metabunk's Earth Curve Calculator. Here we have the geometric results for the curvature of the Earth. Now, if we have a distance of 3 miles, the geometric drop essentially is 6 feet. Now then, that is the curvature of the Earth results. But what happens if we put that into a angular resolution calculator and we work out its angular size? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to change miles into feet, and if we convert 3 miles into feet, we get 15,840. Let's put that in the Earth curve calculator. 15,840. We give an object height that we're trying to look at of 6 feet. And well, what would you know? The degree that it comes out at is 0.02 degrees. Now then, call me skeptical. However, if you go back 300 or 400 years ago, most people's optics were limited to their eyeballs. Very few people had telescopes. In fact, telescopes were mainly used for scientists and stargazing and for looking at boats when you're on a boat. So very few people had the ability to actually check what you could see through a telescope. And so when they were trying to tell people that as far as we could see, the angle, this was the curvature of the Earth, well, no, guess what? Our eyeball can't see anything lower than 0.02 of a degree. So if that human at 6 feet tall is at 3 miles away. We cannot see it on a flat surface due to the limitations of our eyeball. And that's it. And I'll see you in the next one.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Will you?
I've clicked on your.
Oh.
I don't know what that's supposed to show.
Oh, it's just showing an inferior mirage obscuring the bottom of that hill, I think. Yeah, that's what it's showing. Yeah, because you can see here, what it's basically saying, we've got this what appears to be air, this floating island, and of course what we've got here is an inferior mirage, which is just what I've demonstrated in Jose's picture and in my picture of the windmill. You get, and the fold line here is clearly about halfway through the, and as you can see, as usual, it's slightly compressed underneath, and you get an inversion of the stuff above the fold line going into the stuff below it. So it's just typical inferior mirage stuff. It's, yeah, so that's well established and well understood.
There we go. I'm just interested to know why Rumpus is denying the fact that there's a truck in this image here. It's the same location, same height. I'm interested to know why he's saying that this inferior mirage that's clearly visible on this top image on an inferior mirage day is hiding the area where the truck is, and that you're saying that obviously the inferior mirage is not hiding stuff, and here we can clearly see it.
I've never disputed that it does hide some stuff, but doesn't account for all the things that are missing due to the curvature of the Earth. There are occasions when it will obscure a little bit, but for instance, in the wind turbine case, where the base goes much, much lower on a mountain that's missing by, you know, thousands of feet, it's well below the horizon. You've just got a little inferior mirage here. Well, yes, and you obscure a little bit of the base. Why? That's exactly fair.
We're looking at about 40 foot of obstruction here. This hill over here is essentially 50 feet above sea level, and we're seeing down to around about foot. Anything under 40 feet is hidden.
Yeah.
This lower part, this stuff over here, all this land here is hidden behind the inferior mirage. You can't deny.
Okay,
you can't
so we're missing.
deny that the inferior mirage is actually hiding it.
I never did. I never did.
That's cool, because when Jose's presenting it with his building, and we're seeing an inferior mirage like this, which is an incredibly strong inferior mirage. Yeah, let's be honest.
So that's a biggie. Yeah.
And it is with Jose's as well. You know, that you've got to say that, you know, if we're going to compare like for like, you know, we as flat earthers can assert that the inferior mirage is hiding stuff like this is showing here, and obviously you guys will assert something different.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. I never said we weren't agreeing with. I've never claimed otherwise.
First and foremost, I have never ever said that we see inferior mirages and compression in the same images. Secondly, I would say that when we see this type of effect, this compression, on days when we see just compression but no inferior mirage, if you imagine that there was an inferior mirage here behind this, blocking this out, this is my assertion in this respect, that from the same observation heights, you know, we're going to see an inferior mirage on one day, or we're going to see compression on another. And behind the inferior mirage, when you're actually seeing things, when you're actually seeing an inferior mirage, is it possible that this compression is also taking place behind it, except absolutely we cannot see it, although we cannot see it because the inferior mirage is there?
No.
Well, you're not an expert.
I am an expert on this.
No, you're not. You couldn't even explain Jose's. You admitted you were confused by that. So
by certain aspects.
You don't know everything about light. You don't know everything.
No. There are certain aspects of Jose's thing that I do understand this part.
But you also know that the top part of the boat retains the same size.
No, it doesn't. No, it's also compressed. It's just not quite as compressed as much as the bottom.
I might have some other images that I can show you that's actually a fallacious argument, but I've shown these plenty of times. I've actually cropped out images of the top part of this boat and the top part of this, and they match up perfectly.
Well, you can see from
the major compression.
Well, overlay. Okay, look, I'll take your image now. I'll go do a screen grab.
Here goes Ranty with the punchline. Rumpus, hold on. He say the major part, and go ahead, Ranty.
The major compression, the major compression takes part on the lower part of the boat. The top part of the boat, in the wider viewing angles, stays relatively the same. The lower part gets all the compression. Now, if we apply that same logic to the wind turbines, then
yes, they're not showing
exactly
any compression. They're not showing any compression.
That's not what you see in Inferior Mirage.
Yeah, which we've agreed you don't get on the same day as compression, so that's irrelevant.
So behind the Inferior Mirage is the compression.
Behind it, we're looking. What are you talking about?
I gotta give this to Ranty, because how, Rumpus, how are you saying we cannot get compression and an Inferior Mirage in the same day? How do we know this? How can we be looking at an Inferior Mirage, remove that Mirage layer, and knowing is a compression or not? We really don't know. I mean, we cannot say no for sure because we really don't know.
You can. The physics says no, and the evidence says no. There's no example of it happening in the same picture as rapid.
How would you know?
Physics says
How would you know?
Ali, I was in mid-sentence, and the physics says you can't get it either. Go ahead, Ali.
No, I was just going to ask, how did you know it doesn't happen? If you can't see behind the Inferior Mirage, how do you know it never goes on?
Well, what we can see on the when we can look at an image, it's not there. We only get compression or Inferior Mirages, and the physics says you won't get them together either.
So what?
So you've no evidence. So you absolutely no basis for what you're saying. You get compression or you get Inferior Mirages.
On days when we get the Inferior Mirage, we realise that things are hidden as viewed by the other image that I've presented.
Yeah.
So things are blocked out.
But
we know that things get blocked out. So if there was Inferior Mirage here, yes, a small portion. So this small portion, this compressed part here, that's small.
There is no.
So what we would see, so what we would see the big part of the boat at the top. And then we'd have the compression. Let's say that the Inferior Mirage happened where the blue is, just above the Stena line, right? So we get the big part of the boat, and then we did our blink test. What we would say is, well, the bottom of the boat.
Ranty, I have a question really quickly.
The bottom of the boat should be down here, but it's not. It's just compressed behind the Inferior Mirage.
But
you can't prove that it doesn't happen. We can't prove that it doesn't happen, but there's plenty of proofs that show that this effect does take place. And with you saying before about the Inferior Mirage, I just completely, and you agreed that obviously like the area where the truck was on those sands was hidden behind the Inferior Mirage. Yes. Did you see the recent video called Panda Boat? You know, that had Panda Boat in there with the different stripes, similar to this, but obviously you could see the same compression effects of that. It was actually an observation that I'd planned to go down to Wales, North Wales, meet up with some flat earthers, and we actually got out and got there and got on with it. And we got some excellent flat earth proof. Again, it was Panda Boat. It was literally the same as this. It was literally the same as this. It was literally the same as this.
All you're showing here is compression, and Inferior Mirage. You haven't got a point. You have not got a single point here.
Let me find the image, and we'll just put that little claim to best. You just said that it wasn't a flat earth proof, and I'm just going to debunk that.
I haven't just going to debunk, but nothing you've presented so far is in any way a flat earth proof of anything.
So you say that you've not seen this yet, then?
Oh yeah, we discussed this the other day, didn't we?
Wait a minute, you just said you hadn't seen it.
Okay, well I didn't know what you mean by Panda Boat, but this particular image I went through with you in the same hangout. Don't you remember we went through this? Okay. You're claiming I haven't remembered something. You clearly haven't remembered the discussion we had about it, idiot.
All right, well hang on. Let me just finish exactly what we're going to say, because we didn't actually get to the point where we got to the point of this is a flat earth proof in this. We didn't get to that point. It's not a flat earth because you don't think it's a flat earth proof. Do you realise how far away this is, this boat? Because it's actually...
No, I don't.
Well, there you go, you see. But
okay, so really quick, Ranty. So Rumpus, he's about to to present a flat earth proof. Let's hear it. Please do not do the question and answers while he do his short presentation. I want to hear the explanation first. I want to see the footage, and then we can go question and answer. Please, Rumpus, you can mute yourself and others. Please, take a few minutes, Ranty.
You see this white part, the first white part down. So we've got black and then we got white. You see this first white part down here, so the second part of the of the boat here. So it's evidenced here. And then we've got more. We've got black underneath it, then we've got white, then we've got the hull. Rumpus even agrees with seeing the hull. Well, guess what? The top of that boat to the very top up here is 33 feet. Do you know how much should be hidden? 23 feet by Earth curvature. 23 feet must be hidden. So we see this white part that we're seeing. Anything below that should be hidden to Earth curve. So how come we're seeing the black part here in the middle? How come we're seeing the white part underneath it? How come we're seeing the hull rumpus? Because this is not only compression but flat Earth proof. That's why I've even included the details of the boat, how high it was, the distances, everything's included. 3/4 of that boat or 2/3 of that boat should be hidden. But you're even agreeing with seeing down to the hull, and you agreed that we saw down to the hull on our discussion. So if that's the case, then
we're not seeing down to the hull.
Oh, we're not. Oh, we see it. So would you see we're saying that white part then?
We're not seeing the bottom of the boat.
Oh, so you see the front part here?
Can you see in the picture on the left? Can you see the bottom of the water line? We are not seeing that in your image. But
you do realise that this is a close-up image of the boat, and we're obviously if you're looking at the boat, the person that's taking this image is essentially at the mid part of the boat.
Hold on, you seem to be getting confused here. The boat sits in the same way in the water all the time unless it's being loaded up to something. Right. So you can see how much where the water line is and how much of the hull there is. Even if you allow for the compression. Hold on. You had a quite long go. We are not seeing all of the hull, the waterline of the boat. And what's more, we're getting compression. And we know, as in the Isle of Man observation that Anthony Riley did for a year or so ago that I'm explaining, when you get compression, you can see more than the Earth curve calculators because you only get compression when you have a cold water. Yes, I know I haven't made the presentation yet to you, but when you get compression, that is indicative of superlooming because you get compression and it means you can see much further than the Earth curve calculator tells you. I appreciate the Earth curve calculator tells you you are missing a great wad, but in our ray trace simulation, when you get compression, you can see much further, just as Anthony did on that shore-to-shore observation he did from the Isle of... Hold on, Randy, I haven't quite finished. On that 27th of March last year that he did, when he could see when he's lying on the sand about 12 feet above the waterline, he was able to see Shalag Point 50 kilometers away, even though he was very low down. The Earth curve calculator said you shouldn't be able to see this, but we know that you can do that if you have particular conditions of a cold water and warm air, and in the same conditions, you get extreme compression. We know that compression is linked to being able to see much further than the Earth curve calculator tells you, and that's all you've got here. But even in this situation, we can clearly see that there's we can't see the waterline. We're still missing stuff, even though we're in a highly compressed situation.
Have you got a quote for that, Rumpus? 1 minute, Ranty, sorry. Have you got a quote for what you just said there, Rumpus? You said that with compression we see further. Where did you get that information from?
We worked this out.
Oh, you worked it out, and you're not an expert.
In our ray tracing, yes, I said.
Didn't I explain about ray tracing? It even says that it doesn't replicate reality, so it's a waste of time doing that.
It does, yeah. Well, you didn't understand.
No, you're going to get
what you were describing.
Hammered with that. I'll make sure everybody knows about that. You'll get hammered.
Good. We, in doing our ray tracing simulation, we discovered this is how we couldn't. This is what when Anthony Riley made that observation, and he showed that the Earth curve wasn't compatible with the Earth curve calculator. Philip and I were somewhat concerned about this, but just before he made the observation, actually, we'd just been doing the ray tracing on the normal observations he'd made. And so when he came along with that new observation where he was able to see shore to shore over 50 kilometers, we quickly pumped that into our ray tracing, and with the conditions we were able to get for the day, where we discovered it was a cold sea and warm air. And then we discovered, and if you remember the prediction I made before Anthony Riley showed me that video, I said to him, you will get intense compression and to be able to see it. And what happened when he brought up the video of the Isle of Man? There was that intense compression. And when you get compression, like you're showing us now, you can see much further. And in fact, you can see the curvature of the rays is actually greater than the curvature. So it means you could actually see your own bottom in theory. If you could zoom in.
Wow.
If you could see, in theory, when you've got conditions like this, the curvature of the light is actually curving all the way around the Earth. Potentially, you could see your own bottom if you had a zoom. If you could zoom in enough. These are so when you link compression, you'll be able to see much further.
Okay, so I mean, wow, that was a lot of words.
Yeah, really quick. Let me welcome Dross, the legend.
Well, it's a bit technical for it.
Well,
I know it's a bit technical for you.
Technical? Well, no. What you just basically said is that this is a mirage. We're not. This boat wasn't really there.
Everything's a mirage.
Even though we followed the boat, it's on a video. I have video upon video, not just this boat, but lots of other boats moving around. This isn't an image. This is from a video. So everything was being miraged around as a holographic, dancing, looming, flat Earth proof.
Randy, looming happens all the time.
Wait a minute. You know we're seeing the hull. I'm saying, and you've just said that we can see further. So would you agree that this image shows that we can see further than the curvature can?
Yes.
Right, great, perfect. So now you go ahead and show me evidence of looming. You go ahead and make something loom up. That's your proof now. That's your challenge. You can talk all you want. You can surmise all you want. You can ray trace all you like. But you go out there.
Well, this is evidence of it.
You make something.
You're showing us, Francie, an example.
No, this is evidence of the
it's evidence of super looming.
No, this is my presentation for evidence of flat Earth. You show me something.
This is it here, Ranty. This is evidence of looming.
Go and make something loom. No, it's not. Go and make
evidence of super looming. This is because when we pump in the numbers of the pressure and density for this condition that Anthony had, and you'll no doubt have here, you'll find you've got a cold sea, a warm air, and when you pump those into our ray tracer, you get heavy compression and you get sort of curve of the light rays that matches the radius of the Earth, which means effectively the Earth can appear flat as a result of these special conditions. And this is evidence that this occurs. It's evidence of super looming.
Show me to.
Can you show us that work then, Rumpus? Can you bring that work to the table? Wait a minute, Ranty. Can you bring that work, just what you've quoted there, can you bring that work to the table and present it to us all?
No,
obviously not.
I can. Yes, I can. In fact, we've done the maths. Okay, well, you wouldn't. I would have to give you an intense presentation. Leave that. We've got, although we've done the work.
Well, not the now, but I'm saying
yes, we are. Yes, we are going to do that. Yes.
But let me make this clear really quick. To recap, Rumpus can present a lot of math equations. You can do a presentation of math and equation, but do you have any type of footage that we can see with the eyes? It's good to see things.
Yeah,
can you have videos?
This is evidence. This is evidence of superlooming, just as Anthony Riley's footage is evidence of superlooming. And the fact that it gets compressed exactly as we predicted, because we told Anthony, when he said he did this, we told him before he showed us the video, we said, you're going to get compression. And he didn't realize it. It's only when we told him it's going to get compression, he realized this is what happens. And we know from our modeling that when you get compression like this, it means you're seeing much further around the world than the curve than you would normally be, and it's greater than the Earth curve calculator tells you. So whenever you see compression like this, you're seeing further than the Earth curve calculator tells you.
And you can prove that.
Yes, well, as you did, because we know you've done it yourself, Ranty. You said, hold on, you said, Ranty.
I want you to provide a test. I want you to literally do a test, put something on a hill, right, and just behind the hill, just have it so that there's a centimetre of it behind the hill, so you just can't see it. And then I want you to film it for days on end and show it me looming up, peeking up behind the hill.
Ranty, that's what you've got on screen.
No,
you've got it on screen now.
How do you know this isn't a flat Earth proof? How do you know we're not just seeing it?
Because of the compression.
Because of the compression.
Oh, so it's looming compression. Hey, Ranty, we've got a new one. It's called looming compression.
Super looming. I call it
super looming compression. Super looming compression from the bottom.
When you get super looming, you also get compression.
And 4 lines.
I have no answer. Yeah, you do realise that the topography of the land under the oceans has an effect on the water.
No, it doesn't. Jesus Christ, you're an idiot if you think.
Oh, really? Well, I have an email from a professor who studies things exactly like this, barotropic tides for one, who agrees that it does have an effect on the water at the top.
Oh, might be a millimetre or something. Yeah, great.
Yeah, you do realise that the topography of the land under the oceans has an effect on the water.
No, it doesn't. Jesus Christ, you're an idiot if you think.
Oh, really? Well, I have an email from a professor who studies things exactly like this, barotropic tides for one, who agrees that it does have an effect on the water at the top.
Oh, might be.
There's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. there's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirage has been the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Really don't think I need to say anything, really. I think it's quite evident what's happening here. And I think what I might do at the end of this very short video in a minute is play another video to show you what it's like when the Inferior Mirage isn't there. And I'll just show you exactly where I am again. So yeah, I think I will. I think I'll play another video that shows you exactly what this area is like. Barrow in Furnace with the same tide height, same location exactly off the railings, without the Inferior Mirage. And you can be the judge. Before I leave, actually, I think I'll just pan across to the left. And the reason I've done this is because we have this location in the other video.
there's a lot of scientific sort of ideas that are flying around, like angle of attack, like, you know, inferior mirages being the reason for, you know, boats vanishing bottom up, or you know, etc. But for me, what I'm seeing when I look at those videos is the people that make those videos never, ever, ever, ever take the time to actually explain how, for an example, an inferior mirage can have that effect. How, for example, the angle of attack can have that effect, without just throwing keywords like perspective and diffraction in there. And it seems to me that the battleground is to show that these people either do or do not have an understanding of the science that they're talking about. And so far, you know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.
Okay, so this is Sunday the 9th of June 2019. And I'm in my usual spot off the railings, looking over towards Barrow from Anchor's home. And what you can see today is that we do have an inferior mirage, but it's not as strong as it has been recently, but strong enough obviously. What's really quite interesting is that we're now seeing the low-lying land as well. Let's just get to that, this part here. So if you go back to some of my other videos, you'll see that this land that we're looking at now, this what appears to be floating land, isn't visible. There's a thicker inferior mirage that's hiding all that. But obviously today we're seeing it all. If you remember too, that just beneath this tower structure that's there, we had a truck in one of my other observations that was right down at the shoreline. Obviously we wouldn't be able to see that again today because that inferior mirage is still a little strong for that. But hopefully this is the start of the weather starting to clear up. We've still got plenty of summertime left. We had very, very poor weather all year up to now. This inferior mirage is killing all my observations this year. It's not playing ball, it's hiding too much stuff. It's certainly not like last year, that's for sure. But yeah, some interesting stuff, just showing you how much can be visible depending on the strength of the inferior mirage. You know, it's not all a consistent height. You know, sometimes we have a thicker band, sometimes it's a thinner band. Today it's a thinner band, and that's where we were able to see this land here. So I'll show you my location as usual. Just off the railings. What's interesting is that I had a comment on one of my videos today, and they said, I don't understand why you're showing this well-known phenomena. It's a well-known phenomena. Why are you showing it? How does that prove the flat Earth? Well, first and foremost, to win any war, you've got to understand where the winning arguments are. Now, last year, and the year before, the Globe has said that this obstruction that we see, this inferior mirage, is where the start of the curvature of the Earth was. So, anything beneath this centre point where the mirage starts you know, that is where the curvature of the Earth is. That's what they said. And it's interesting to note that he now refers to it as a well-known phenomena, whereas an inferior mirage is nothing of the sort. It certainly hasn't been a well-known phenomena. It was claimed for Earth curve, that was it. That's what it was claimed for. It was their proof. And many an observation was lost to that fallacy because without us looking into it and understanding it, and understanding what it actually does and what's actually happening here, then, you know, we were losing those arguments. And that's why it was so beneficial to do this line of work, this inquiry, this research, because once we understood the inferior mirage, we realised it wasn't Earth curvature at all. Nothing of the sort. So in actual fact, where the inferior mirage is, and slightly just above it actually as well, just slightly above it, is blockage. It's atmospheric blockage, it's not Earth curvature. So now when you see boats go off in the distance and they end up in an inferior mirage, you know that you should have line of sight to the bottom of the boat. You should have line of sight to that. You should have line of sight to the bottom of this hill, but we don't. The line of sight is blocked by the inferior mirage, and that's just the way optics work. That's it. So no, it wasn't well known at all. It wasn't understood. It was just claimed for globe proof for the longest of times. So yeah, so that's why I show this stuff. That's why I come to the same spot. That's why I repeat these observations over and over and over. This is why I've got 4 terabytes of data, because this is what advances our arguments. This is what gives people the ammunition to say, hey, we went and did an observation today, but we had an inferior mirage. And then you can work out data from that. It all starts from knowing what you're actually looking at to start with. So I just thought I'd mention that because it kind of irritated me. That people think it's now a well-known phenomena. So yeah, I'll tag this on to the other video that I just played a minute ago, so I'll edit it later and put it as a one video, and I'll see you in the next one. Again, I'll just show you my location just for proof of location, etc. Just get you the time, 1 second. Just get you the time. Time is 11:49 in the morning, Sunday the 9th of June 2019.
lives.
You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them. You know, if there's anybody that you know of that makes really good videos that actually goes into the detail of the science, I'd love to see them.